For those of you that don't know me, I'm Ken Pickering, as Joelle mentioned, and my relationship to Cy Garber goes back to the late 70s, and as Joelle mentioned, I did meet Cy through Gary Crystal at the beginning of the folk music festival experience, I think somewhere around 77, 78. I think the very first time I met Cy Garber, Gary was with him, and it was at a joint on Seymour Street and Pacific, Mexican place called Carlos and Bud's. And that's, I don't know how many of you remember that place, but yeah. So Gary, who I'd met through Jack Schuler, my partner in Black Swan when we started that up in 1975, and Bridget Rivers Moore. I had a lot of ties to the folk music festival through the music, through friends, and through Black Swan. With Black Swan, we did the vinyl retail at the folk music festival for 13 years, running from the inception of the folk festival right through to, I think, 1990. And through those years, I really started to see Cy around a lot more and more. And in those days, well, actually, I mean, still today, I live up in that sort of 17th Avenue between Cambia and Main. And for so many years, the Folk Festival office was on Main Street. So hanging out up there with, you know, Ann Blaine and Tambatana was always around. People like Brent Gibson, Doug Rochelle, Cy was around. They were really bringing a lot of memories back to the surface for me. Cy's history is very rich and deeply connected to the folk connection to songwriters, what's now known as world music traditions. And when I had a look at the words about his life, it was just unbelievable. I thought I had some idea of who Cy was, but I was completely blown away by his range of experience. And when I look at his CV, it was just kind of mind-blowing. I mean, you can see that he was a real troublemaker right from the late 60s, and I mean that in a really good, positive way. However, what's maybe not as well known to as many folks is Cy's involvement in the jazz world. And I think that really started to develop once he got involved with us in the mid-'80s, and I'm so glad that he did. He never looked back. He loved it all, and he's a guy that could go from Buffy St. Marie to Evan Parker, you know, in a heartbeat. And his involvement in the Jazz Fest was maybe a small part of his overall life's work, but to us in the jazz community, it was really a big deal. Cy's ears were large. He embraced his role at the Jazz Festival from the beginning, and he was with us from 1986 through a 27-year run. And Cy's role at the festival was, I think, very special. The reality was that he was at the mixing desk for many of what, for myself, are many of the most memorable shows that we produced over all of those years. At the beginning at the Culch, and later on at the Roundhouse. Cy was at the mixing desk for, you know, I'm famous for laundry lists, and I have a bit of one here, but I'm going to cut it down. But everybody from Steve Lacy, ICP Orchestra, Dave Douglas, Marilyn Crispell, Roscoe Mitchell, EST, the Now Orchestra, George Lewis, Kenny Wheeler, William Parker, Atomic, Herb Robertson, All-Stars, the Dedication Orchestra, Francois Oul, all the great local players, Paul Plumley, Dylan Vanderscape. We did Willem Breuker, Han Bennick together, Rova Saxophone Quartet. Cy was at the desk for all of those shows, and these were really, for those of us that have been around for these decades in that scene, these are some of the best memories that we hold. And those are just some of the shows. We've still got some professional recordings that Cy mixed for us in the mid-'90s that we had done this European project with John Butcher, Barry Guy, Mats Gustafson, and those are still kicking around, and I've got to dig those out because, as I recall, it's pretty amazing stuff. Cy was there. Some of the good memories were hanging with Cy at the shows, having a beer, maybe smoking a joint back in the day when I indulged and that kind of thing. Sometimes hanging out, in the depths of the Culch in Dusty's office. Yeah, lots of good memories around that. But in the end, really, and everybody's mentioning this, and it is so much about community. And if you live it, it brings meaning not only to your own life, but to everyone's life around you. And Cy is a testament to that. Cy Garber could be found at the center of so much amazing music in Vancouver and beyond as well, as you've heard. Over all these years, he's an amazing man. He took care of his business with conviction and grace, and always in service of the music. I always considered Cy to be a friend first and a colleague second. Cy Garber will be missed by many, and we will not forget the life of Cy.